What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT. I know it's been a while since we last were on here talking college football. The NFL preseason got the best of me. Deion Sanders got his first ever start. Travis Hunter is playing both ways in the NFL for the first time. So college football somewhat got put on the back burner. I apologize for that, but we're back talking college football now, people. The college football season is only 2 weeks away, and you know it's close when the first ever AP poll comes out and they're doing what they do best, rage baiting everybody. And I'm going to be honest, they got me. In what universe is Penn State a better team than Ohio State when they've lost to them for 8 straight years in a row? Look, you can sell me on Penn State possibly winning the national championship this year. They bring back a lot of talent. You still Jim Knowles away from Ohio State. But to be the man, you have to beat the man. In the great words of Ric Flair, woo! And Penn State hasn't beaten the man in 8 years. So why are they ranked ahead of Ohio State? Why are they ruining what is supposed to be number 1 versus number 2 in America? And even Texas being number 1 over Ohio State is disrespected. I've never seen a team that won the national championship more disrespected than what Ohio State is entering this season. It's as if they didn't win the national championship last year. Literally nobody at all but me thinks that the Buckeyes have a chance to repeat as national champions. Downright disrespectful. They recruit just as good as anybody else in the country. They have a great coaching staff. Ryan Day is an elite head coach. Look, he can't beat Michigan, but he can beat everybody else. So until proven otherwise, Ohio State should be ranked number 1 in America. And they definitely should be ranked ahead of Penn State. The Penn State propaganda is at an all-time high going into this season. Every offseason, it's the same rinse, wash, and repeat cycle of Penn State. This is finally the year James Franklin gets over the hump. This is finally the year that Penn State takes down Ohio State and they lose every single season. And you're left going into every offseason disappointed, asking yourself, is James Franklin the guy who can get Penn State over the hump? I'm sorry, I just have to see it to believe it with Penn State. The SEC has 10 teams ranked in this initial AP poll. 62% of the SEC teams are ranked in this. The Big Ten only has 6 ranked teams. So, according to the AP poll, the SEC, whether you want to admit it or not, is the undisputed best conference in college football. It has nothing to do with SEC bias. Nobody cares about the conference affiliation that these teams have. If you had to bet money on which conference was going to have the best teams, the most ranked teams at the end of the season in the college football playoff poll, are you putting your money on the Big Ten or the SEC? If we are wise bettors, we're putting our money on the SEC. From a top 4 standpoint, the Big Ten is better than the SEC. I would take the best 4 teams out of the Big Ten over the best 4 teams in the SEC. But if we are going off which conference just has more depth in terms of good quality teams, then you're being dishonest if you're not going to say that the SEC has more depth than what the Big Ten does. The Big Ten has 4 teams, and once you get past that top 4, there's nothing there. There's no meat. There's no mashed potatoes in the Big Ten. You're looking at Nebraska, USC possibly being able to cement themselves as potential playoff teams, but do you have more confidence that a team like Nebraska or USC is going to win 9 games compared to Tennessee, Ole Miss, LSU? The SEC from the top to the bottom has a bunch of great depth. That's why they have the most ranked teams compared to the Big Ten, who only has 6. The majority of these Big Ten teams that's on this outside of Indiana, they're ranked in the top 25 nearly every single year. Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, it seems to be the same thing every year when it comes to these 3 schools. Outside of that, you don't really have anybody else that's a really big mainstay in the Big Ten. Maybe that possibly changes. Maybe Nebraska and USC can change that this year. Illinois, I think they're a tad bit overrated. Don't get me wrong, Illinois is a good team. They return a lot of experience. Luke Altmaier is one of the better quarterbacks in college football. Nobody gives him credit for the amount of improvement that he made last year. If college football had a Most Improved Player of the Year award, it would have went to Luke Altmaier, because before last year, he was god-awful. Especially if you remember how bad he was at Ole Miss. I never thought that Luke Altmaier would have looked like a competent quarterback, but he did last season. There's reasons to be high on Illinois, but not to have them as the 12th best team in college football. But the SEC just reigns supreme over everybody. Let's just keep it a stack about it. Let's just be honest. If you can't take your hate towards the SEC aside and understand that they just are a deeper conference, which makes them better than the Big Ten, then that's just a you problem. The Big 12. They have more teams in the AP poll going into week 1 than the ACC. Now, for the last few years, the Big 12 has been widely viewed as the weakest Power 4 conference in the sport. Well, that's about to change this year. The Big 12 is sneaky good. I wouldn't be shocked if we see 2 teams from the Big 12 get into the CFP this year. Texas Tech, they come in 23rd. They paid $28 million for their team this year. They spent the second most money in college football on their roster. This is the best team that money can buy. Are they going to be Texas A&M 2.0? Or are they going to play up to the amount of money that they spent? Because if they do, then they should just steamroll through the entirety of the Big 12. The Big 12, it doesn't really matter about who has more depth than who. From a talent standpoint, Texas Tech is the equivalent to a top 5, top 6 team in the SEC. They just have bigger, better, and stronger athletes than everybody else in this conference. But do they have the coaching that can take them the distance? That's why Texas A&M couldn't buy themselves a playoff spot with the amount of money that they spent under Jimbo Fisher, because Jimbo Fisher lost it as a head coach. Iowa State, they returned a lot of proven production from last year. You got Rocco back, who was really productive last year. We know that Matt Campbell is one of the more underappreciated coaches in college football. Kansas State, under Chris Klieman, they always are a pretty consistent top 25 team on most occasions. Arizona State, Sam Leavitt comes back. They bring back a lot of experience also with most of their coaching staff intact. So they definitely could repeat as Big 12 champions, but don't sleep on other teams like Colorado, BYU. The Big 12 is going to be as competitive as it's ever been in recent memory. Now, Alabama should be a lot higher than where they are. This is one of the 5 best teams in college football. Alabama doesn't have too many weaknesses, if any at all. They have concerns. They have questions. Ty Simpson is a question. How good is he going to be? How is this offense going to look with Ryan Grubb reuniting with Kalen DeBoer as his offensive coordinator? Is that ground game going to improve? Outside of that, Alabama has arguably the best defense in college football, not just with what they returned from last season, but with the amount of potential NFL players that they have on that side of the ball. They have arguably the best secondary in college football. Alabama's defense is as good as anybody's that's ranked ahead of them, and their offense is not too far off. They got a good offensive line. They have one of the best receiving corps in America. Alabama winning the national championship, being in that national championship conversation isn't being discussed enough. Kalen DeBoer last year was the worst season that he's ever had in all his years being a head coach. Expect for the Tide to bounce back in a major way. Michigan is overrated. They should not be ranked in the top 25. We don't know how good Bryce Underwood is going to be. Their offense doesn't really have a lot of firepower. If you put Nebraska or USC ahead of Michigan on this top 25, could anybody really be mad at that? With how bad things went last year for the majority of last season, I don't get why Michigan is on here. They just have so much to prove relative to everybody else that is ranked on this and the teams that they are above. Hell, I have more faith that Indiana will be a better team than what Michigan will be this year. There's just so many questions, so many unknowns that have Michigan ranked on here. But these are just my quick initial thoughts on the first AP Top 25 poll of this season. Leave some of your takeaways down in the comment section below. Somehow, DJ Uiagalelei made it to the NFL. So I've been watching DJU in the preseason for the past 2 weeks, and he's looked better in the NFL than what he ever did last season at Florida State, which is a huge indictment on Florida State and Mike Norvell, because it shows that Florida State is incapable of developing the guys on their roster. And it shows how broken Florida State's recruiting is, which is a huge reason why they had that 2-win season last year. They relied too heavily on the transfer portal to overcompensate for their inability to recruit players out of high school and properly develop them, and it bit them in the rear end. When you have a guy in DJ Uiagalelei, who was a former 5-star recruit, who wasn't nothing special from a production standpoint, but he was decent at Clemson, he was decent at Oregon State, then he comes to FSU and has the worst season of his collegiate career. All of a sudden, he comes to the NFL and he looks like a completely different quarterback. I thought when DJ Uiagalelei got signed by the Chargers, they were about to make him switch to tight end or a defensive end. But you watch DJ Uiagalelei in these NFL preseason games, and you're left asking yourself, where was this last season? Where was the accuracy? Where was the touch? I mean, going to the NFL has made DJ Uiagalelei a completely better quarterback than what he was at Florida State. Florida State recruits, if you're watching DJU in the preseason, you got to be thinking twice about committing to play for Mike Norvell. Mike Norvell, other than Jordan Travis, he hasn't been able to successfully develop a quarterback. And it's not that FSU doesn't have talent in that quarterback room. Brock Glenn was a blue chip player coming out of high school. You had Luke Kromenhawk, who was highly touted coming out of high school, and neither one of those guys were able to ignite a spark on FSU's offense last year. So you get DJU, who leaves, goes to the NFL, where he should look even worse than what he did at Florida State, and he just does a complete 360. He threw a beautiful bomb the other day in the Chargers preseason game against the Saints. Just an absolute dart. That's the best throw I've seen DJU have in over 2 years watching him play football. Florida State right now, this is a really huge season for them, not just for the future of Mike Norvell as the program's head coach, but for their respect, for their reputation. I'm not saying that FSU is going to have another 2-10 season, but if they're not at least a 7-win team, then the respect level of Florida State has to go down because you no longer can view them as a premier brand. If anything, we talk about Oklahoma being the next Nebraska. Florida State might already be the new Nebraska. Maybe Mike Norvell was carried by the greatness of Jordan Travis and that great transfer portal class that he was able to bring in with Jared Verse, Keon Coleman. A lot of those players from that transfer portal class that FSU brought in when they got snubbed out of a playoff spot, those guys have gone on to be really successful in the NFL, at least most of them. Jared Verse is one of the best up-and-coming pass rushers in the NFL. So you lose a guy like him, you essentially lost 3-4 wins. Mike Norvell and Florida State are not looking good right now with how DJU is balling out in the preseason. He's not getting a lot of opportunities, but when he is getting in the game, he's making the most of them, and he just looks so good right now. When I was betting on the Hall of Fame game, which is an exhibition game, it doesn't really count for the unofficial preseason, but it's just an exhibition game. I took the Lions to win because I was telling myself there's no way that when they put DJU in, he's going to look anything good. He's probably going to throw them 2-3 interceptions and win them the game, but it was complete opposite. DJU looked more accurate, more polished, better in the pocket. That's what happens when you get better coaching. Great coaching improves you as a player. It makes you look better than what you actually are. But when you're suffering from bad and competent coaching like what DJU apparently did at Florida State last year, this is a sign that Florida State, their program is not in a good spot right now. If there ever was a team who needed to win 7 games more, it's Florida State this season because DJ Uiagalelei is exposing how broken that Florida State football program is right now under Mike Norvell. The SEC better watch out for Oklahoma's improved offense this year because everything that made Oklahoma's offense an atrocity in 2024, Brent Venables has fixed. You had some of the worst quarterback in all of America in 2024. What does Brent Venables do to fix that? He goes out and gets the best quarterback out of the transfer portal and John Mateer from Washington State, who last season was 8th in FBS in passing efficiency. Oklahoma was 101st in passing efficiency last year. John Mateer has a lot of similarities in his game to Bo Nix. He takes care of the football. He's incredibly accurate. And he is a superb athlete. This is a guy who led all quarterbacks in college football in rushing yards, missed tackles, and explosive runs. He had 55 broken tackles last year. So when John Mateer runs the football, essentially he turns into a running back. And with the wide receiving core that he's going to be throwing the football to, he's going to look much better as a passer this year than what he did at Washington State, where he was only throwing to one NFL receiver. And for the John Mateer skeptics out there, believe it or not, yes, there are skeptics of John Mateer who like to point out how he struggled against the best teams that he went up against. It wasn't because John Mateer was bad. It was because Washington State just got rostered to death. Going to Oklahoma when you're throwing to a wide receiver like Deion Burks and a bunch of other good receivers that Oklahoma has, is going to elevate John Mateer. John Mateer is going to elevate Oklahoma. If you have no quarterback, you have no shot to win. You can't win in the SEC like you're Iowa. You can't win in the SEC trying to be college football's version of the Pittsburgh Steelers. We're going to be all defense, all special teams, and we're just going to try to win with whoever at quarterback. Not only does John Mateer improve Oklahoma's passing attack, but he improves their rushing attack as well when you pair him up in the same backfield with Jaden Ott. Jaden Ott, 2 years ago, He had over 1,300 rushing yards, 12 touchdowns. He was averaging 5 yards per carry. That means that for every 2 carries that Jaden Knott got, he got a first down. Jaden Knott and John Mateer, with what they bring to the table from a rushing standpoint, it puts more pressure on opposing defenses because now you don't know how to defend Oklahoma's offense. Last year, it was easy to defend because they could only do one thing, which was run the football, and they couldn't even do that really good. Now it's pick your poison. If you're going to stack the box and try to slow down John Mateer and slow down Jaden Knott, then John Mateer is going to destroy you over the top. They got playmakers. They got a lot of speedsters on this wide receiving core. So they have more than enough star power to make you pay if you want to load the box. If you want to say, all right, we're going to lighten the box so we can have more numbers to defend against the pass, then they're going to carve you up. It's so difficult to defend Oklahoma's offense this year compared to only having to worry about defending the Oklahoma offense that didn't really give you anything to be threatened by. If anything, Oklahoma's offense was going to beat themselves with the amount of turnovers that Jackson Arnold and Michael Hawkins were choking up. John Mateer with Jaden Knott is one of the most dangerous backfields in college football this year. There are not too many teams that have the star power at quarterback and running back like Oklahoma does. Oklahoma's offense is going to set the SEC on fire this year. They're going to burn this conference down to the ground for the amount of disrespect that's been shown to this program over this offseason. It's funny to me how all of these changes that Oklahoma has made seem to be getting glossed over. It seems as if them adding John Mateer, them adding Jaden Knott doesn't mean anything. When you go to ESPN.com, you look at their SEC projections, you look at their FPI, they're not giving Oklahoma a lot of the respect that they deserve because they still have them finishing in the bottom half of the conference when Oklahoma is good enough to be a 9-win team and possibly compete for a playoff spot this year thanks to the addition of John Mateer and Jaden Knott. This is going to be a vastly different offense, a more improved offense than what you saw last year out of Oklahoma. And when they have a better offense, the best offense is a great defense because now the defense doesn't have to be on the field for as many plays as what they were last year, and they don't get 45-second Gatorade breaks because they got to come back on the field after Jackson Arnold just committed another turnover. He just committed another turnover as we speak. When is college football going to start showing Deion Sanders more respect? When is college football going to stop viewing Deion Sanders as a gimmick coach? Do you not see what those Colorado boys are doing in the NFL right now? 7 players that are in the NFL that played on Colorado's team last season were all making plays during the first week of the NFL preseason. If you want to get developed, you want to receive NFL level coaching to prepare you to have instant success in the NFL, you go to Colorado and you play for Coach Prime. You saw LaJohntay Western take that punt return to the house for 6. You saw Shedeur Sanders doing this thing out there in his first NFL start. You saw Travis Hunter playing both ways in his first NFL start. You saw guys like Xavier Weaver, who went undrafted, even though he should have went drafted last year, catch a touchdown this past week. Deion Sanders is building an NFL factory. This is a place that you go if you want to win and you want to receive NFL level coaching and development to prepare you for the next level. If you truly are not trying to chase a bag and you're trying to chase generational money, which is what you will get if you make it to the NFL, which Deion Sanders gives you the best chance to do that. If you know that you don't have a chance at playing at Alabama, Georgia, any of the top elite programs in the Big Ten or the SEC, instead of chasing the money, Go chase the place that gives you the opportunity to chase that generational money when you get that second contract in the NFL by going to play for Deion Sanders. Deion Sanders has all these players NFL ready, and it's no surprise why they're dominating right out the gate in the NFL. College football needs to stop cheating Deion Sanders out of the respect that he deserves. He took a one-win team and delivered them their second winning season in over 2 decades. When is Deion Sanders going to get his flowers? Why is it that the media, other than you guys know the dudes on ESPN that try to undersell what Deion Sanders is doing at Colorado, like it's a fluke, like it's luck. Deion Sanders knows what he's doing. Deion Sanders is not only changing lives and making players better, but look at the prime effect. Look at the impact that he has had on this sport. There is no Bill Belichick at North Carolina if Deion Sanders isn't here. You don't see Eddie George coaching Bowling Green if it wasn't for the prime effect. College football needs to stop trying to undersell Deion Sanders as a coach and give him his due credit. Deion Sanders is a good coach. Is he like a Kirby Smart or a Steve Sarkisian? I'm not going to go that far, but he definitely has proven that he knows what he's doing. But yet college football still tries to make him out to be about clicks, not trying to get wins, still living off that Dan Lanning preseason speech or pregame speech. Let that go. Why are there so many talking heads that cover college football that are disingenuous about what Deion Sanders is building down in Boulder? I don't know if Colorado is ever going to be able to win a national championship under Deion due to the certain limitations that he has with him not being able to outspend for some of the blue chip guys needed. But he could get a lot further than what anybody else at Colorado would have the ability to get this program as far as winning a national championship. Guys like Jordan Seaton, it's going to take more guys like him willing to turn down a big payday at a school like Georgia or Alabama for the sake of playing for Deion Sanders with the goal of improving the program and receiving NFL-level coaching and development to get that generational money at the next level. You see, all these players are just caught up in the short term. They're not thinking long term. They're not thinking about the bigger picture. Do you want to cash out now and peak in college? Or do you want to take less, cash out in the NFL, and get life-changing money? Because it's easy to burn through $2-4 million in college, especially after you graduate if you don't make it to the pros. But if you make it to the pros, only getting like $2 million across 3 seasons playing for Deion Sanders, you're setting yourself up to get paid $15-20 million a year, depending on what position you play in the NFL. Hell, most rookie contracts are fully guaranteed. So your rookie deal, if you are a second, third, first round pick, you could be getting all of that fully guaranteed. That's like $8-10 million in a bank account. Most of these players aren't worth that kind of money like how these 5 stars are getting. And even these 5 stars aren't getting the kind of paydays that these rookies like Travis Hunter are getting, and they're fully guaranteed rookie contracts. College football needs to start putting more respect on Coach Prime's name. You look at the glasses, you look at the amount of attention and popularity that Colorado receives because of the impact of Coach Prime, because of the influence, but it's more than just flash. It's more than just clicks. When you go to Colorado, you are improving your chances of not just succeeding at life as a person, as a man, but also increasing your chances to be a long-term starter in the NFL. Colorado and Deion Sanders, They are becoming an NFL factory. They're not getting enough praise for what they've done in terms of player development, especially when they're not able to recruit at the level that some of the bigger programs are. So that makes player development a lot more important for Deion Sanders and his staff. It makes it more important that they get the right guys out of the transfer portal. So if you want to go to the NFL, you want to get a chance at getting generational, life-changing money. If you can't play for Alabama, Georgia, Texas, or any of the other top programs in college football, you should be taking your hand pots on the Boulder, Colorado to get coached up by Deion Sanders. Because all of those guys that were playing on Colorado last year, they were making their presence felt in the preseason. You see, I don't understand how Gunnar Stockton is seen to be a huge question, a huge concern for Georgia this year because he's unproven. He doesn't have a lot of experience. We don't know what he's capable of. When there are other teams in the SEC this year, like Ole Miss with Austin Simmons, Texas with Arch Manning, who are also starting unproven quarterbacks. But those teams, those quarterbacks are getting the benefit of a doubt. But Gunnar Stockton can't, though, because he's not flashy. He's the biggest question mark that Georgia has walking into the season because they don't know what they're going to get out of him. But you don't know what Texas is going to get out of Arch Manning. You think you know what you're going to get out of Arch Manning because of the last name. But if you were to remove the Manning name off of the back of Arch Manning's jersey, you wouldn't view him the same. You wouldn't have the same expectations for him as what you do when you see the name on the back of his jersey. You believe more in Austin Simmons than you do in Gunnar Stockton because he was a more highly touted recruit coming out of high school. Gunnar Stockton was a 4-star recruit. He was a blue chipper. So why is it that Gunnar Stockton is the most doubted quarterback entering this season when everybody else, there's tons of other quarterbacks in this conference that are just as inexperienced as what Gunnar Stockton is, but he's supposed to be the Achilles heel for Georgia this year? I don't believe that. I actually believe the complete opposite. I believe that Gunnar Stockton is about to humiliate all of the doubters, and he's about to be good enough to get Georgia right back into the SEC championship and possibly win another national championship. Gunnar Stockton doesn't need to be an elite quarterback for Georgia to contend for a national title. The last 3 national champions, Ohio State, they had Will Howard. He wasn't an elite quarterback. He was a good quarterback, not elite. Michigan won with the handoff merchant, J.J. McCarthy. Just because he got drafted in the first round didn't mean that he had elite production. He just had elite NFL traits that made him worthy of being a first-round selection. And not too far ago, or long ago, Georgia won back-to-back national championships with a walk-on quarterback named Stetson Bennett, who, by the way, at one point, some will argue with you, wasn't even the best quarterback on his team during Georgia's first national title run under Kirby Smart. Some were arguing that JT Daniels was more talented than Stetson Bennett. Nick Saban, some of his best teams, he didn't have the most talented quarterbacks. Like when he won with Jake Coker, A.J. McCarron was the most accomplished quarterback, but that doesn't necessarily mean he was the most talented quarterback he had. He wasn't more talented than Bryce Young and Tua Tagovailoa. Greg McElroy, he won Nick Saban's first ever national championship at Alabama, and he wasn't that talented. You don't need to have an uber talented quarterback to win in college football. You don't need a Lamborghini to win a national championship. All you need is a Honda Civic that can get you from point A to point B, that doesn't have a lot of miles on it, that's reliable, isn't going to break down on you. That's what Gunnar Stockton is for Georgia. That's what Kirby Smart wants out of his quarterbacks. Do you not remember Kirby Smart picked Jake Fromm over Justin Fields? He doesn't care about the flash. He doesn't care about the pizzazz. He just cares about consistency. That's what Georgia didn't receive a lot out of Carson Beck last year. Carson Beck had a lot more on his plate due to the offensive line being inconsistent because of injuries, a receiving core that led the nation in drops, and questionable play calling at times. So the situation didn't help Carson Beck that much, but he had a down season. Gunnar Stockton will be much better taking care of the football than what Carson Beck was last year. And it also helps that the offensive line should get back to playing at the standard that we've grown accustomed to seeing a Georgia offensive line play at, with an improved group of wide receivers, bringing in a guy like Zachariah Branch out of the transfer portal. Then you're also going to have the ground game there, so you're not going to have as much pressure on Gunnar Stockton as what you did on Carson Beck's shoulders last year. Kirby Smart has never been a head coach that's been all about throwing the football at will. He's always been about complementary football, being balanced, being able to run the football and throw it just as well. You got to have that balance to win in the SEC. When you get too overly reliant on one thing, you get yourself in trouble. Gunnar Stockton doesn't need to be a Lamborghini. He doesn't need to be a Corvette. He doesn't need to be a Rolls Royce. All Georgia needs Gunnar Stockton to be is a Honda Civic that's going to be consistent, that can get them to where they need to go, which is the SEC championship and possibly another national championship. It drives me crazy when the improvements that USC's defense made last season get completely ignored. Oh, I don't know how good USC's defense is going to be this year. Lincoln Riley can never get the defense right. Last season, USC went from giving up 30 points per game to 24 points per game in Deion Lynn's first season. There's a reason why Penn State and a few other schools were trying to steal him away from USC, because he is one of the best defensive coordinators in the country. And before Deion Lynn arrived to South Cal, USC defense was non-existent. Alex Grinch, whatever he was calling on defense, it was just an all-you-can-eat buffet for opposing offenses with how atrocious his defensive play calling was. So you bring in Deion Lynn, he emphasizes improving the line of scrimmage, getting bigger, stronger, and more physical on defense, and you could see the improvement. There's no way that you could have watched USC's defense last year and not see a defense that looked much better than what it did in 2023. At least they could get stops. The issue that USC ran into in certain games, especially in the fourth quarter, was they just didn't have enough depth on the defensive line, which is why they lost to Michigan when they had that 2-point game-winning drive, or that 2-minute game-winning drive, only running the football. USC couldn't stop Michigan's ground game because they didn't have the depth. They didn't have the horses. They didn't have the bullies needed on the defensive line to slow down some of the more physical teams in this conference. Well, the biggest improvement that USC has made entering Deion Lynn's second season as their defensive coordinator is the talent and the depth that they've added to the defensive line. Now, with more talent and depth on this unit, USC, they're going to be better against the run. They're going to be better at getting you into obvious passing situations. They're going to be better at making sure that they don't allow teams to run the football at will in the fourth quarter. When you can win early downs and you put your opponent into second and long, third and long situations, then it helps out that pass rush, because now guys can pin their ears back and completely get after it, which also is going to be a huge improvement for USC's defense this year, because not only do they bring back a lot of talented pass rushers. Guys like Cameron Fountain, who was a top 100 recruit coming out of high school a few years ago. He can be in for a breakout season. Devin Tompkins, look out for him. He could also be somebody who can contribute to helping get more pressure on the quarterback this year. But also, you got this freak and Jakeem Stewart, who's supposed to be a freshman, but he already is built like he's an NFL player. 6'5", 290 pounds. So you have a bunch of athleticism and a bunch of guys who are primed for breakout seasons year two in this Deion Lynn system on this defensive line. It also helps that they added 2 4-star defensive linemen and Keyshawn Silver and Jamal Jarrett out of the transfer portal. USC doesn't just have good top-end starters on their defensive line, but they also have good rotational guys so they can rotate guys in and out and keep guys fresh, similar to what Tennessee was able to do last year. I'm not saying that this USC defensive line is what Tennessee's defensive line was last year, but they have the ability to keep guys fresh. With the defensive line making major improvements in that area, you're going to see a better overall defense, because if you can't win on the line of scrimmage, you're going to lose a lot of games. No matter how good your corners are, no matter how good your linebackers are, the game is won and lost on the line of scrimmage. USC did everything possible this offseason to ensure they don't lose a lot of games on the line of scrimmage anymore this year. You return linebacker Eric Gentry, who only played in 5 games last year and put up monstrous numbers before he went down with that injury. He's going to be a major chess piece. He's going to be a major component for this defense. He's good in coverage. He's good against the run. And he's a really good blitzer. They got a talented secondary. They have a bunch of competition going on in that defensive back room. You got Kamari Ramsey, who returns. He could have went to the NFL draft. You got Bishop Fitzgerald from NC State out of the transfer portal. 3 interceptions, 8 pass breakups, 35 tackles last year before the Wolfpack. You also got a really good transfer from San Jose State and DJ Harvey, who had a breakout season last year in the Mountain West. There's a lot more talent on this USC defense on all 3 levels than what they had last year. Last year, let's just be honest, they weren't prepared for the bully ball mentality that they were going up against in a lot of those in-conference games against Big Ten foes. Now they are. Now USC doesn't have to worry about getting bullied anymore. Now they can start doing the bullying in their own right. So when you tell me that Lincoln Riley doesn't know defense, he'll never get the defense right, I ask, if you're watching USC, I asked, did you watch USC's defense last year? Because USC had a top 50 defense and points per game allowed. And with Deion Lynn entering his second season, they definitely should improve. There's no way that they don't improve with what they have added via the transfer portal, the guys that they have entering another season in this scheme. We are bound to see the best season that USC has not only just had under Lincoln Riley, but the best defense that Lincoln Riley has ever had as a head coach. He has talent, he has depth, and he has a great defensive coordinator. The SEC is the best conference in college football because this conference has the most quality teams from top to bottom that can make it to the college football playoffs. Realistically, you can make the argument for 9 teams in the SEC that can be a possible participant in the CFP this year. But the issue with the SEC is that you have a few teams that get judged based off recency bias. What they've done in the last season or so gets into the way of people being able to properly evaluate what certain teams are going to be this season. They judge teams based off the success they had previously, and certain teams, like the ones that we're going to be going over on this list, are getting overhyped because what they've been and what they've done in the past. And no team better embodies that than Tennessee. Tennessee isn't even a top 25 team in my opinion. They just lose too much to be as good as what they were last season. You lose a really good pass rusher in James Pierce. Your best corner, Jamal McCoy, who was an All-American, we don't even know when he's going to be healthy enough to play this season. You already are thin at the cornerback position as what it is without him. Then on offense, you got to replace 3 of your top receivers from last year. You replace 4 starters on the offensive line. Then you also lose the SEC Offensive Player of the Year in Dylan Sampson. So there's a lot of new faces that Tennessee is going to have on both sides of the football this year. Their defense should still be really good, but I don't know if their offense is going to be as effective running the football as what they were last year. You had a really good offensive line in terms of being able to open up holes on the ground. Your receiving core is unproven. Not a lot of production there. We don't know if your receiving core is going to be as good as what you had last year, or if you're going to have a receiving core that struggles with drops, that struggles to get open. I'm not really too concerned about them losing Nico because, to be quite frank with you, he wasn't that good in my opinion anyway. I feel Uiagalelei will be an upgrade over Nico, but they just have a lot that they have to replace. I don't think that they've recruited at a high enough level to just be one of those programs that doesn't have to rebuild. They just reload. I think this is a rebuilding season for Tennessee this year. Ole Miss has won 10 games, three out of the last 4 years under Lane Kiffin. And last season, they went all in on trying to make it to the playoffs last year with the stout transfer portal class that they were able to acquire. Unfortunately, they came short of the expectations that they had. Then you got to reload all over again. Now, they once again bring in a pretty impressive transfer portal class, but when you live by the portal, you die by the portal, and I don't think that their portal class is going to have the same impact as what last year's portal class had on this team. Plus, you have questions on the offensive line, which Jackson Dart was able to overcome some of the inconsistent offensive line play because of his mobility. Now, losing Jackson Dart shouldn't be too big of an issue because you're replacing him with Austin Simmons, who was a blue chipper coming out of high school, one of the best quarterbacks in his high school class. But when you have a young quarterback that's inexperienced behind the offensive line that hasn't really been that good, there's going to be some issues. There's going to be some growing pains, especially with the schedule that Ole Miss has to play. When you got to play Georgia once again, you bullied them last year. You're going to be able to do the same this year. You don't have the same talent on the defensive line this year as what you had last year also. Then Pete Golden, I feel he was carried by the talent that Ole Miss had on that defense last year. I still am not really a huge believer in him. So I think that Ole Miss crashes back down to earth. I think they probably are like anywhere between a 6 to 8 win team this year. I wouldn't be surprised if we see them drop under 500. They just have a lot of replacements that they have to get some good play out of to be as good as what they were last year, and I just don't see that happening. Missouri may be the most overrated team, not just in the SEC, but in college football in general. They're the definition of living off the past. The past 2 seasons, they've had consecutive 10-win seasons. Eli Drinkwitz has proven to be one of the better coaches in college football. The issue with Missouri is, like Ole Miss, they're very dependent on the transfer portal due to them not being able to recruit at a high enough level to simply just reload every year. So they're going to have a down season or two occasionally, especially with them having one of the most murkiest quarterback situations in the SEC. The majority of the teams in the SEC this year already have proven quarterback play, or at least quarterback play that even despite having a guy that doesn't have a bunch of experience, you still have confidence in them because of the pedigree. Well, we don't know who's going to be starting for them this year. It's supposed to be Drew Perbula, who was the backup quarterback for Penn State, but we don't know too much about him. We don't know how good, if he's good at all. So for Missouri, the quarterback situation is a question. How good are you going to be at receiver, replacing Luther Burden? How good is that offensive line going to be? You also struggled against the best teams on your schedule last season. So with the struggles that Missouri had against the good teams that they did play, which they've been able to take advantage of having a weak schedule from an SEC standpoint, avoiding some of the top teams in the conference like Georgia, I just see Missouri coming back down to being a 6-7 win team. Maybe they can rattle off a few upsets and get the 8 or 9, but I'll be shocked if they get the 10 wins this year. Texas A&M, I don't think is overhyped for them not having the talent, because they do have the talent. And I don't necessarily feel like they're overhyped because they don't have the ability to win the SEC, because they definitely can. I believe in Mike Elko. I just feel that it's a year too early for Texas A&M. For some reason, I feel like Texas A&M has another 7-5 or 8-4 in them this season. And then in Mike Elko's third season next year, 2026, I think that's when we see the Aggies finally make that run. Now, they did make some really good portal additions. You get Concepcion, one of the best receivers out of the transfer portal from this past portal cycle. There's a lot to be hyped up about when it comes to him. This dude is an electric player. You got Marcel Reed, who looked really impressive taking over in place of Connor Wigman. But he did look really shaky near the last stretch of the season. He didn't play with the same level of consistency as what he did early during the season. Maybe that was because defensive coordinators started to figure out this offense. Maybe it's because they started to understand Marcel Reed's tendencies a lot more. The defense also is a concern. How good is that secondary going to be? They also lose a lot of talent up front. So Texas A&M, the talent's there, but it's the consistency from Marcel Reed going to be there. It's the consistency out of the passing game going to be there. And is that secondary going to improve? So these are the most overhyped teams in the SEC entering this upcoming college football season. Let me know what teams you have on your list. Do you agree with this one? Let me know down in the comment section below. John Gruden said he'll die to coach in the SEC. He wants to get back into coaching, no matter if it's in the NFL or college football. It's just killing John Gruden that he's not able to be on the sidelines coaching football. And I feel John Gruden will crush it as a head coach in college football. I've been saying for the last couple of years that somebody should give John Gruden a head coaching opportunity to coach some college kids, because he has the perfect personality for it. He's very charismatic. He'll get along well. He'll resonate with the younger players that he'll be coaching. I think that you'll have less concerns about his ability to coach college kids than what you do with Bill Belichick. That charisma that he has will also help him in the transfer portal and on the recruiting trail. And one thing about John Gruden, despite him saying a few times that he doesn't really like the whole NIL aspect, you give him an opportunity with somebody like him that just lives, eats, and breathes football. He'll put his all into doing whatever it takes to win, especially in the toughest conference in college football, because you kind of have to view football as religion when you're coaching in the toughest conference in college football. And I think that the perfect place for John Gruden will be Arkansas. You have Sam Pittman, who right now seems to be a dead man walking because Arkansas is not good. You got Jalen Green, Bobby Petrino, and then everything else. So Arkansas, more than likely, is going to be one of the worst teams in this conference this year, which means Sam Pittman could get fired, and that sets up an opportunity for Arkansas to hire John Gruden. Arkansas, I believe they have a pretty good NIL collective. Their basketball team, they put a lot of money into that. So with John Gruden, they wouldn't hire him without him saying, hey, man, like, if I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to be able to win, I need enough money to go out and buy the guys that I need. With John Gruden specializing in the X's and O's, at least with how he breaks down the game and talks about it, the dude is an offensive guru. So John Gruden, he doesn't need to have an insanely talented team. He doesn't need a roster full of 5 and 4 stars. He just needs a few of those guys, and you get a few good transfer portal additions here and there. John Gruden can be able to close the gap that he lacks in talent with his schemes and with his coaching. Now, another thing that would benefit Arkansas by hiring John Gruden is that you would get more buzz around your program. Arkansas, Fayetteville, it's ducked off. It's not really a big market. They got a huge fan base, but they're not really talked about from a national standpoint. John Gruden, he will bring much needed buzz to that program, especially if they end up being as bad as what they are expected to be, and with how they've kind of been a little bit irrelevant these last couple of years with the bad coaching hires that they made, how the program has seemed to regress since that 9-win season that Sam Pittman had a few years ago. You would need somebody like John Gruden to get people talking again. And John Gruden has rehabilitated his image, because when he was last coaching for the Raiders, he had some emails that leaked where he had some language that was kind of racial. So he ended up stepping down. It was a huge disaster from a PR standpoint. Well, since he's been on YouTube and been with Barstool, he's been able to repair his image. He's back in the Buccaneers Ring of Honor. So I don't really think anybody will be tripping off the past. Players know who John Gruden is as well. And with the kind of personality he has and the enthusiasm he has for coaching football, he'll just make it fun to play for him. So Arkansas getting John Gruden, it will bring much needed attention, much needed energy to the program. I feel it will be more publicity around Arkansas hiring John Gruden than what there is right now around North Carolina hiring Bill Belichick, just because Bill Belichick isn't in the media talking as much as what John Gruden is. Another thing is that I think that you get John Gruden, you make a few good transfer portal pickups, you get a few good true freshmen with the NIL money that you can commit to him. You right out the gate could be an 8-win team or better. That's how good of a coach I think John Gruden has the ability to be in college football. The guy knows his stuff. He knows how to coach guys up. He just is really passionate about the sport. He has a lot of knowledge, so he'll be really good at being able to develop players. Arkansas also will be able to get him for a pretty reasonable price. Instead of going out there and paying top dollar for one of the best head coaches from the G5 range or one of the top assistants, John Gruden probably would give you a little bit of a favorable deal. Maybe he doesn't ask for as much as what Bill Belichick is getting at North Carolina due to the passion and love that he has for coaching. Shoot, talking to John Gruden, he might just take the job for free if you allow him to. The guy just wants to coach. So I think that Arkansas is a pretty good place for John Gruden. I think the location of it also is really good as well. Fayetteville, Arkansas just seems like it fits John Gruden very well.